Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the last panel of Talent's short film market, short film criticism, A New Hope. My name is Emilia Mazik, and I will have a pleasure to moderate this conversation about short film criticism, very much anticipated conversation that I will have a pleasure to have with actually 3 panelists. Don't be misconducted by just the 2 people on stage. We also hope to connect with one more speaker, and there she is. Hello, Savina, good to see you. Yes, so let me begin with a very short round of introductions. So together with we will speak together with Niels Putman from Belgium, who is a chief editor of the online short film magazines Court Film and Talking Shorts, the latter which he co-founded. He has served on press juries at international film events in the likes of Tampere and Cannes. Niels is a member of the Belgian Film Press Union, the Ensor Academy and FIPRESCI. He also works as a film distributor at Avila, which is focused on Belgian films. As a freelance programmer and curator, he is affiliated with Fantoche International Animation Film Festival, Leuven International Short Film Festival, Film Fest Ghent, and Queer Film Festival Pinex. Hello, Niels.
Hello.
Also, to my left, there's Laurence Boyce, who works for POF Shorts, part of the Black Nights Film Festival in Estonia. He works both as a programmer for the festival's main competition, as well as being the head of program for POF Shorts, so the short film section. He's also an award-winning film journalist who has written for numerous publications, amongst them Scream International and Cineeuropa. He's also a member of FIPRESCI, the London Critics Circle, European Film Academy, and BAFTA, and he's also the president of the board, chairperson of the board of the Short Film Conference. We also have here with us Savina, who really wanted to be here with us in person, but unfortunately her flight got cancelled. But let me also introduce her nicely. So Savina is a Bulgarian freelance film writer, editor, and programmer based in London. She covers shorts and features at European film festivals such as IFFR, Berlinale, Cannes, and Venice, with bylines at Movie Notebook, Talking Shorts, Little White Lies, and Film Comment. She is currently completing her PhD at King's College London, where she also teaches film theory and video essay practice. Hello. So this panel was actually an idea of Enrico Vannucci, the artistic director here in Torino, who came across a very interesting article that will be our point of reference in our conversation today, that you, Laurence, happened to write 18 years ago. An article which was written in as a summary of a workshop, film critic workshops at the 50th edition of Kurzfilmtage Oberhausen. And I'm afraid that maybe most people here in this room didn't have a chance to write this piece. So would you like to refer a little bit to this situation and tell us a few words what was discussed during that particular workshop? I have only one quote from this. The title was "The Short Film and Critics, Do They Ever Meet?" So already the title can bring some implications. But it was opened by a quote of Lars Henrik Gass, the director of the festival, stating in the festival catalogue, "Festivals replace the critical examination of cinema that used to exist in feature articles and film magazines." So, quite controversial, I'm not gonna lie.
Yes, I will preface this by saying this was comparatively a long time ago. The piece I wrote, I still look back at it and am slightly impressed by the naivety of it all. But I still remember that time, and as I say, at Oberhausen, they had an event called Short Films and the Critics, Do They Ever Meet? And some of the basic ideas were that the festival itself felt that critics, especially those who dedicated themselves to film, had no capacity or no proper way of talking about short films. That the way in which short films were discussed, especially those within Oberhausen, were basically not fit for purpose. That there was a disconnect between the critical world and the short film world. It was, of course, a controversial statement. But again, we're talking about, I think, 18 years ago now, when also the landscape of how writing is done and how it's received has changed completely. I think I remember arguing that, you know, it was difficult to write about short films. There is one thing to say, the critical response to short films is not very strong. However, there was a problem with the spaces in which to put that critical response in the first place. If there was nowhere to put it, which is not necessarily therefore the fault of the critics. We also have an issue about the critical space, about magazines, about where those spaces were to put this writing in the first place. From that point, and you know, looking back at that article again, I wrote a long time ago. I reflect on how I think spaces have changed, and I think how critics are able to respond to short film, and that it has become, hopefully, a lot better.
Niels, Savina, what were your initial thoughts when you read this article? Was it still? Do you think that it still has any relevance, or do you think that things actually changed completely and we live on a different planet by now?
Yeah, I wish we lived on a different planet and things would have changed more. Because you say that you were, when you look back at it, you think you were naive. And I'm wondering why you think that, but there's a lot of things that are still very much relevant. And you wrote, for instance, that the connotation is generally that short films are like business cards. I think for a lot of people, they still think that's the main reason why short films exist, sadly enough. So that hasn't changed in the last 18 years. And you also mentioned that short films are able to inform us about the future of the moving image, which I think is, I mean, I guess that's why we're all here and we believe in exactly that. And obviously you mentioned the fact that back then there was more distribution going on for short films. You talk about DVDs and channel TV. Now I think we're going to talk a little bit about the streaming platforms that have been increasing in the last few years, really. So I still think it's pretty relevant. I'm just sad that it is still relevant and not much more has changed in the meantime.
Savina, what about you?
Yeah, I think I'm with Niels on this. I think you can hear me, right? Just checking.
Yes.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'm also sad that there isn't the big change that we would love to see in 14 years. But at the same time, I must admit I felt a little bit called out because how I started with short films was whenever I was writing about a first-time feature director, which I often do, even now, I would go and watch their shorts whenever they're available. And this is something that Laurence mentions in the article, that this is how critics even mostly mention shorts. And I feel like it's a shame, but it's a vital part of us going backwards and investigating what has been used as a springboard. But I feel like short film has to be rethought, not as a business card, but as a show field or a springboard to something bigger. So I think we do need new vocabulary to be able to tackle this and maybe, experiment with an ontology of the short film and the short film criticism too.
Yes, I really would like to go back also to the language at some point, what kind of language we use when we speak about short film. But before that, I wanted to quickly ask you also about, you mentioned already the availability of short film, that this is a big obstacle, that you mentioned this a lot in the text, that films are not available, so that it's increasing, but it's still relatively low. And now, of course, we have the overflow of new opportunities, digital opportunities, platforms, and short film medium seems to work so well. It's so easily adaptable to the virtual spaces. So my question is, does it really help, this overflow? Does it help you in your work to maybe justify to some editors that you want to write about these particular pieces? So how did this digital shift influence your work? But also, does it actually improve the life of film critics, or is it even more precarious than it used to be 18 years ago?
I mean, there's firstly a practicality to it. I do write for a number of outlets and magazines, and in the past I've often had, I would like to write about X short film, Y short film, because I think it's interesting and it deserves to be written about. And often the question I would get from editors would be, well, our audience is going to be able to see it. It's no good that you've seen it at a festival and you say it's really good, but is anybody going to get to see it afterwards? What's the point in us giving space to something that nobody's going to get to see? The change in online availability and distribution has made it easier for audiences to reach those films, and therefore easier as critics within those certain spaces to be able to go, this film is available, an audience will be able to see it, therefore I believe it is worth talking about. There are business practicalities, and one of the business practicalities with some outlets will be, we're not even going to touch it unless we believe that people can see it in the first place.
Yeah, that's very much the case. I think, I mean, since there's more availability for the short films, I mean, I don't think we're there yet in the sense of the visibility that they are getting. I think we're like on the very, very start of what hopefully will change more in the future, and also one of the things that we're trying to do with Talking Shorts. I'm both hopeful and pessimistic, because I feel like, in a way, more visibility for the short films helps audiences better to understand what they can do and what short films are about and all that. I'm a little bit more pessimistic on the funding institutional side, where I still think that a lot of the perceptions that we were talking about in the previously is still much there. Like it's more of something that students make, etc., etc. So I hope also that not only the audiences start to appreciate shorts more, but also the people with the money. But we can definitely come back to that later as well.
Savina, would you like to comment as well on this?
If it wasn't for Talking Shorts, I don't think I would have had the opportunity to do as much writing as I am doing now on the short films. But that said, I've also done a couple of in-depth pieces for big publications, such as Movie Notebook. So they've been receptive to that, but only in the occasion that they were distributing the short film on their own platform. So there's a caveat to that as well.
Let's hope so.
And I just wanted to add, you tacitly mentioned it, it's also about the space, and you might come on to this a bit later, but the space we occupy and who we're talking to. Mm-hmm. Because I always think there is also thinking about, criticism works on a level for one people to the converted, as it were. People read criticism to respond, to have a deeper understanding or to read that. And often criticism is also a way of bringing new audiences to something that they don't necessarily know as well. And I do think it's also those kind of spaces we're occupying also links into the idea of the availability of stuff. Are we doing it to say, you don't know this, come in and learn more about it, and there are other things we're going, you know this already, but it's us having a dialogue because you're reading and responding to what we're writing.
I think one of the main goals that we have Kortfilm.be, for instance, is partly, it's the film educational part and also the audience development part. I think they go hand in hand, and I think that's where the main reason of being is for platforms like Talking Shorts, and so I'm totally with you on that. Yeah.
You mentioned that. From what I hear, from what you say, is you see the role of film critics also as people building a bridge between audiences, festival programmers, those who actually have space to reflect on films, because we, the programmers, we very often don't have that time. We screen 300 films at our film events, and who actually have all this time to go deeper. But I'm also quite curious, because also you mentioned earlier that there is a need for new language to develop around short films. So I wanted to quickly come back also to this aspect of the conversation, because you also mentioned the possibility that short film criticism could be a tool for young critics to also develop their skills for future. This is what I've heard in your part, Savina. But it is a little bit different when you write with the intention that audience may not see the film. Also, feature film criticism is using very special language that we are very used to. That is very often plot-oriented when you describe the work, while short films are very specific, not very often, they're very often hybrids, very experimental. So I'm super curious, like, what is your perception also of that part? And also if there is a discussion between critics, if it doesn't even exist in this short little world that we share. Maybe this time, Savina, would you like to begin?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been thinking about this difference of language that we use to describe and to analyze short films, and thinking back on my own personal experience, I think it's a bit more particular because what I'm drawn to most in my writing is close analysis. So formal elements, scenes, mise-en-scène, these kind of specific going into, I think it's academic and just a huge admiration of the film form, that I find it sometimes easier, and oftentimes I find it easier to dwell on the form of the short film. Not really I'm not super into plot analysis, really, and I think that makes it easier for me personally, and I love that the short film gives us that drive to look at the form and to think more of the building blocks of cinema, which I do think they share. I mean, they do share all the building blocks. It's just the convention of time, I guess, of the duration that we have. But I've been thinking about this history of comparisons that has flooded film as a medium, I think. So if you think about the analog versus digital debate, let's say, it's been made to be such a huge thing in the way that we think about film in the last maybe 50 years, I guess. Gradually, of course, the last 30 years mostly, that we had to come up with a way of legitimizing digital in opposition to analog. And we lost so much time in legitimizing it, so making sure they're both on the same page and judged by the same scale, that we only now are starting to see the affordances of the digital on their own, let them have their own language and their own forms, developing not only content-wise. So I think short film and feature film are kind of in the same situation. So if we're trying to catch up to speed short film and think of it as legitimate as feature film, I think we're doing it wrong. So I think we should be quicker and be more inventive and see short film as possessing affordances of its own that doesn't have to gain the legitimacy of feature films.
I see the two of you nodding.
I agree. I think it's, but also short film is so diverse that it allows for a wide range of responses. Even for talking shorts, I think about some of the things I've just done over the past couple of years, and like one was, for want of a better word, a sort of silly horror film. Yeah. And I wrote that almost like a comedy piece, because that was the only way in which I could respond to it, to try and, because it was quite a normal, interesting sort of comedy, dark horror comedy, but how could I sort of bring that out? And I sort of decided to take a more humorous approach towards that, because I thought that was the way to go with that one, rather than just give a staid analysis. I've done experimental films, and experimental films are hard to write about, because again, you're trying to try and explain an experimental film on the page.
Yeah.
Is terribly difficult, and it's about how you bring out those moods and those ideas and what that film is trying to do.
In a way, what you're saying is that as if we say that short film is more free to experiment with form and style and whatever, short film criticism is as liberate in a sense, or is liberating in a sense for a writer, or you can think about form as well. Is that what you're?
I think, as always, it depends on the outlet.
Yes.
It still depends on the actual people that you're writing for, and the freedom that they're giving you to be able to respond to something. Mm-hmm. You give me a lot of freedom, to be able to, there are certain parameters that you want, to keep within, but I can still be a lot more freer with how I'm responding to stuff than I might maybe for somebody else.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we changed at Kortfilm.be, we just recently did a makeover, and we used to call the texts that we write on a specific short film, we used to call them reviews, recensies in Dutch, but we don't do that anymore, just because I think it's weird to think of those pieces of texts as reviews. It's, for me, a review is connotates a little bit to like, is it good, is it bad, is it mediocre, is it the green tomato or is it the red tomato, and I don't think that works for shorts. I mean, it's I see the text that we write also at Talking Shorts more like it should be like a companion piece to the piece of art, to the film, much more than anything else. And I think the focus is much more on analysis and exactly what Savina was saying, and how she goes into like writing about a short film. I think that very much reflects as well as how I want our texts to be.
But it's also, I think I mentioned this to you the other night. It's also funny though that whilst we try and, I think, the best things you always want to do are avoid the cliches of the feature film world and things like that, because that is always a problem when it is like we only legitimize short film by making it like a feature, and that works within the criticism as well. We only legitimize short film if we review an individual short film like a feature, which is not true. However, I do think in some ways it's strangely radical taking a short and reviewing it in and of itself. Because one of the things of short films, usually in how they're received by audiences, especially at festivals, is they see films as part of something else. They're usually always part of a program, and those films inform each other. And we actually take that back, and we take, here's a short film, and we give an analysis in and of itself. Yeah. Which the short film world, at least the film festival world, doesn't do as much because of the very nature of how it works.
Yeah, I think at Talking Shorts, that's what we're trying to do with like the notes section, where we have more in-depth essays that usually go into like a specific program. Savina just did one on Kurtwin Ayub, I think it was, who had a focus program at Winter Tour. So yeah, I think that's definitely also something where short film, and I think that short film criticism in general should focus on more, and then talking with the Talking Shorts hat on is something we want to give more space to in the future as well. Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to add quickly that I find it wonderful to have reviews in Talking Shorts section of reviews that is 900 words plus of a short film. I really love that rule, and I think it's a radical act too, because feature film reviews often capsules of 500 words, etc. So if we're talking about length of reviewing, that's also something that we can think of that we can do differently. And Talking Shorts is already doing differently, because if you have this word limit, you have to be more attentive, and I think this is a great lesson for any film critic at any age and any point in their career.
Yeah, I also wanted to address a little bit the shift within the online outlets that we tend to refer, but I wanted to dive more into that. Because yes, since the availability of short film is such a big problem, although in the last couple of years, because of also because of COVID, the online festivals made short film more accessible, and we have, of course, all these streaming platforms. But I also see, especially the example of court film, I think it's quite interesting that this is the medium that describes itself as an online hub on Belgian short films embedded in the international film landscape, with texts, viewing tips, and a curated video on demand offer. That was a quote from the editorial line. So I wanted to ask you, Niels, it sounds very holistic to me that you somehow see your role also. When I was reading your bio, it was pretty clear that you wear many hats as a programmer, curator, writer, editor, and so on. So that this holistic approach is now, is it the key, or what are you trying to achieve by that?
I think what I was saying earlier, the main goal of kortfilm.be is opening up the little bubble that we're in, we're all in here, and we all know that we love shorts and we know how they work, and we're excited to work with them, and we want to open it up to, I always say broader audience and like a wide audience, but I also don't like to use the term wide audience because you can never reach everybody. So let's say at kortfilm.be we're trying to reach at least the people that might already have an interest for film or arts or culture in general. And the recent makeover that we did, which was very recent, it's all changed in October, which was last month. And if I just can elaborate a little bit on what has changed, is that we used to only have Dutch texts, but now we also featured English texts. And the biggest change is that we also have a very small curated collection, like a video-on-demand collection of short films. And the way we work there is that we each 3 weeks, we release a double bill. So there's one Belgian film that is connected to an international film. And this international film is curated by an international programmer that we ask to search for a film that they either think contrasts with the Belgian film or is like a companion piece to it. And then every Belgian film gets an elaborate essay in English and in Dutch. Both Laurence and Savina have also written one for the Belgian films. And then we ask the guest curator also to write a little blurb on their choice. So that's how we work. And we're still figuring out a lot of the things. We haven't even been doing any promotion for it. It's just like starting out, building the catalog a little bit, and hopefully our goal, like I said, is that we will reach people and we will tickle their interest by providing shorts that are available to watch that have an essay that contextualizes the film and gives more in-depth analysis of the film in particular. So that's more or less what we're trying to do. Yeah.
Also creating buzz here in Torino around it. So yeah, very well. And how do you contrast that, Laurence or Savina, when you all work with bigger outlets like Cineeuropa? Is there any space for short film criticisms there, or is it more like industry journalism that you are providing for them? Can you convince your editors to also work with short?
It's, I will again make just a caveat that I am a freelancer for various trades, but I am a freelancer and therefore I'm not, I'm talking from my experience and not talking about their editorial policies. I'm talking about my personal experience working with certain trades. Now, working with stuff like the trades isn't about criticism. Mm-hmm. It is about news. It is about stories, about events and festivals. That is mostly it. Sometimes this industry stuff is almost like anathema to the short film world, but it still exists and it's still there, and it is very difficult. The space that is given to shorts is small. It is often said that there isn't any room, that there are more important things to cover, and to find no space to write about short film within an industrial complex is difficult. I have to justify a lot of stuff to be able to do it. I do think this kind of stuff is still important. People say that the short film industry is small, but it is an industry, it still exists. And the fact that these events happen, I think, are important. And even industry writing on events, as opposed to criticism, I still think is important for the short film world. Though with criticism, yes, mainstream, for want of a better word, outlets, it's very, very, very difficult, though every so often you can slide something in. But again, there's a lot more having to justify. What we do have are the spaces like Talking Shorts, like Uberquarian, even Yellow Bread that's been resurrected. These are spaces that are more willing and dedicated to taking short content.
I feel like there should be a more cross-contamination between mediums and outlets, but they're all governed by many different facets of the industry, I guess. But I feel like lots of the outlets that I do work with, which are not trades, they're not really big, they can allow from time to time, but always it has to be a few shorts together, like in a text. So I don't think any of the outlets that I write for can afford to have a singular piece, a long piece on one particular short, even whether it's available or not. So it has to be a length which is already saying a lot about the context that within which we view shorts, also in a program like the festival, but also when they're released online, are often also curated in the same way, or we are forced to, as journalists and critics, to make our own curation and package them up for the audience, for the readership. That's on the one side, and on the other side, I think it's somehow a vicious circle, which also has a redeeming quality. Since more bigger streaming platforms such as Movie and Criterion, they're putting on a lot of shorts, even new shorts of young filmmakers that have just toured the festival circuit themselves. By putting them on their platforms, they create more space or outlets to be interested because we can pin them to the release of the shorts on Criterion, for example. So I think it's good, but also it's highly selective too. Maybe it's a symptom of a larger shift happening, just happening quite slowly.
Also the problem is when we're just talking about larger outlets, is that what they will do is if you justify it, you will say there's a star in it, or it's made by a vaguely famous director. But the trouble is, if they take it, you're perpetuating those old myths that a short film is only worth watching if somebody famous is in it, etc., etc., etc. It becomes this thing where somebody will take it, but it's a lot harder if you go, this is completely new talent you haven't heard of, they're just great.
I just want to add that we're obviously emphasizing here on short film criticism, but when I say I'm pessimistic about short film criticism, I'm also quite pessimistic about film criticism in general. I mean, I don't know how it is in different countries, but in Belgium it's pretty rare to come across something, I mean, definitely in like the mainstream media. So I think that is definitely decreasing. So yeah, I think there's even less spaces for short film, obviously. So if a lot of the things just also are for film criticism in general, they're not just focused on short film in that sense. But yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Okay, so time for to kind of switch the table, and because we have quite some festivals and maybe decision makers here. So what can we do to help? Like, how can we improve this situation of short film criticism, and how do you see our role in it, of festivals or film markets, if there is one even?
Be aware that, I mean, it comes down to, again, it's a practical issue that, for example, with festivals, even on an industrial point of view, there's almost like, we'll pay for a hotel and the festival will pay for their flight to go. Often with freelance journalists, there's nobody paying for them. If you want coverage, you actually might need to, don't expect the journalist to necessarily come to you. If you want to think about coverage, you need to actually go, okay, should I invite somebody? And if I invite somebody, should I even pay for their flight? Because they're not necessarily having anybody behind them whatsoever. It's a boring practical issue, but it's the truth. Now, yes, things have changed, that you can give a journalist online access, things like that. They don't necessarily have to come, but obviously having somebody there changes the nature of that coverage. Boringly practical, but it does make a difference. I wear many hats, but if I just went somewhere as a journalist and they said, would you come, but you have to pay your own flight, I wouldn't earn the money back. It wouldn't be worth my while.
Savina, any thoughts?
I mean, I can't come up with such a practical solution, which I agree is super, super important what Laurence said. And, as a freelancer who is just starting out, for me that's also a deal breaker, and also that's how you get people to really experience the joy that your festivals are creating. When people sometimes they don't know that they haven't thought of short film criticism as an option for them, and I think it exists in such a I don't know, it's in a parallel. Not a parallel world even, but it's so close to many of the young people starting out for sure now, for example, that a little bit of a fate, or even, for festival programs, catalogs, all these kinds of things, or if you have any year-round or promo things leading up to or after some sort of engagement that it has, that critics can supply. I'm sure lots of us would be happy to do that. But also I've been thinking about film criticism not only as written but as podcasting, and I think short films and podcasts meld super easily together. So this is not saying that film festivals should make podcasts, but I'm just saying that maybe that's a very good way of meeting halfway for both of us. I think that's pretty promising.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that obviously Talking Shorts was founded by a group of festival representatives who thought of like filling in the gap, and I think in a way festivals are helping and should potentially be helping more in lobbying about the importance of short film criticism again towards funding institutions. I mean, I know festivals have a lot to lobby for. That's just like one more thing on the pile. But luckily, we've been Talking Shorts has been supported by a lot of festivals who think the cause is very important. Yeah.
And I also would say it's festivals, and anybody needs to think about what do they think they want from criticism stroke a journalist. Do they want someone to come and watch films and write reviews? Do they want somebody to come and cover the industry? Do they want somebody to come and do interviews? Do they want somebody to do everything? It is also about you thinking, there is sometimes this thing, especially with younger film festivals, say we must have journalists there. But you also have to ask yourself, why? What do you expect to get out of it as well? And you need to have that dialogue with somebody. You might have somebody over and think, well, they'll do 10 articles, yay. And it's like, not necessarily, you know, might not get one, you know. It's that you have to have that dialogue and that preparation to talk to some people and know what your expectations are from those people who come.
Yeah, definitely. I think short film festivals are trying, but of course there are, as Niels mentioned, many issues, and also proper work with journalists is also work that how you prepare them, how you brief them. But yeah, definitely. Maybe it's moment to ask also our audience if anyone would like to ask a question. I will run with a mic. I know it's the last panel and we are all very tired, but okay, I will give you a couple more minutes. Or someone? No. Okay. Yes, there is a question. Hold on.
So I think the idea or what you're doing in Belgium is great. You know, the people who are reading, they have a film they can watch. I think so. That's one of the main problems, that you can read about shorts, but you have no chance to watch them unless you're from the industry, and we can go through our databases. So that seems a very appealing approach. I like the idea, you know, to write differently about shorts. So maybe one side is to find out what is the unique selling point, how you would say in the money world. But I think what often is not made in feature film festivals are the curated programs. Usually you have retros on persons, but the part of the curation is something very specific to shorts, and maybe it would be more interesting to read about a certain program. What is the thesis of the program? Which films are in it? So maybe that's also one approach to be different to the featured world, which maybe helps, maybe not, I don't know, but it could be an interesting approach maybe.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we briefly mentioned it before, but I think going forward with both of the platforms, I think this is a very interesting approach to also dive into this curatorial work that goes into making a program, and how do the films feed each other, and how does all that work, because I think it's like an added value of definitely the film festivals and the programs. And so and thank you for the compliments.
Yeah, we mentioned this tension earlier, although also we have to keep in mind that short films were not necessarily made to be put into programs, and it's a very much programmer's perspective that we think in programs, and maybe online environment change it a little bit, how we program online platforms, so we give more air and more context around the films we present, and I think it's actually perfect space to be also filled not only by curators but also by critics who can write about the films available online. But I wanted to also ask you maybe a little bit more question about your professional life, if I might, because since you all do so many things, of course, because you are all, more or less freelancers, that you are critics, programmers, curators, sometimes jury members. Very often I see you within the festival circuit. And how do you combine these roles? It seems pretty natural, but are there also some ethical issues that may arise when you do so many things?
I mean, I've written about stuff that I programmed, but that's always been I've written about it, and then sometimes it's been submitted. I see films, sometimes I'm going to write about them. It doesn't necessarily mean they're in my festival. I write about films sometimes afterwards as well. But I've never really had any the sort of two roles of being a programmer and being a journalist sort of do seem to fit together quite nicely, and it is just this job, as it were, it is increasingly unsustainable to do one thing, to be frank.
Yeah, I have similar experience that I might add to that, that I do often ask myself the question, like maybe it's also like if we see our roles, and I really hate the word, but I'm going to use it as gatekeepers, as a programmer and even also as a critic. I think there's a lot of overlapping there. And if I'm in like the context of Belgium, or let's say Flanders, if I'm doing and the only like magazine there is, I'm doing the chief editing of that, and then there's the programming, you know, and then I'm like, maybe I should open it up to somebody else to just not be I'm not the only one, but I mean, I'm one of the few people who is doing it. So it's more a question of also opening it up to other people to step in and yeah, exactly that, yeah.
Yeah, I've been wondering about juries, and whenever I've served on a short film jury or even a music video jury, judging them as short films, I've always loved this access that I get to all these amazing works, because I'm not programmed anything in short films so far, so I don't have usually the access to these films. So it's always amazing to you know, get your head filled with so many ideas and so many different perspectives, and then you have to pick a few, and then these ones probably get a little bump here and become more well known, etc. They travel, but so many others that just seep through the cracks, even though get picked up by other juries or other festivals. So that's I always feel very ambivalent about ending a jury duty, thinking about, oh, we have all these access, we have all these films that we have access to, and yet so many of them are not seen. It's not because we can't see them, but also because people can't see everything, and it's our job to kind of point them here and there, but it's also finite. So I feel like this is all a big project of companionship and working together, programmers, festivals, critics, distributors, everyone, to just, not only increase access, but also amplify voices and give a lot of opportunities for these films to be seen.
Yes, but I'm maybe wondering if when I hear you that that you would only write then only good reviews. And this is another issue that I might see, that because there is not that many opportunities to write about films, then you would rather not necessarily trash them because yeah, or are you, as you say, that they function like an additional piece next to the film, functioning itself as an essay. But is it really a thing? Really bad reviews of short films?
We used to do that a lot at kortfilm.be, and then we got sad students who you know, and we really deliberately decided to switch that, in the sense that we think it's much more valuable if we have, I mean, there's so much stuff out there, like you say, and if we can a little bit guide the audience by giving them or guiding them towards the films that we think are important to see and to read about, then let's just put all the effort and the energy into doing that instead of trashing the films. I mean, still we do have the space to be critical, and we should always be. And it's not because I mean, there have been texts at Talking Shorts as well that. I mean, I can think about a film and have my opinion, and then I ask a critic to write about it, and they might have a different opinion, and that happens. So there's still there's just definitely that space for it. But more often than not, we do tend to focus on the films that we like, and I don't think it's a bad thing. I had a lot of thoughts about it, and like, shouldn't we be more writing more negative reviews or reviews? And I think it's fine if we focus on the things that we actually want to put forward, and yeah.
It's also, what is a bad review, if you know what I mean. It's like, it's an old paradigm of this. You have to, a review or a critic piece is saying, this was good, this was bad. It's not, has to be that. You don't necessarily have to write a piece saying what you thought about the film. A good critical piece is you investigating that piece of work.
Yeah.
and sometimes criticizing and not saying, sometimes saying this doesn't work and this is why it doesn't work. But this paradigm of you have to either say it was brilliant, 5 stars, or how dare you waste my life with this 1 star is an old form and a feature film form that doesn't necessarily need to be there. And also what you mentioned is that, for example, I often pitch stories. I often don't get, Laurence, would you write about this? And you do tend to gravitate towards stuff that you want to write about because you like it. And that is, in a way, a self-fulfilling prophecy, because that makes more positive reviews, because I would rather, if I choose, I would rather write about something that I like to bring out more of its positives. If somebody says to me, write about this, and I do not like that film, I will say I do not like that film. However, I have to do it less because I gravitate towards things that I like.
Yeah, so paradoxically, it seems like the question of more critical reviews or writing about films that you don't really like, maybe in some ways can be thought of as a form of privilege, which is quite funny because I would never think of it that way. But now, like in this conversation, yeah, because when you have the opportunity to be asked and to be commissioned stuff, then you have larger margin, and also, the more outlets there are, the more opportunities for reviewing an essay, the more scope we have, and the different ratio between positive and negative, if we can even term them that, which I usually resist doing. But yeah, it's about opportunity, possibilities being opened up, and some sort of privilege. So funny. So many things in words when talking about short films, and I love it. I think it's amazing. Super potent.
I see another question, and we have time for maybe 2 more, so whoever feels like it.
I mean, I still remember we were in Clermont in the kitchen talking about talking shorts, and we said, let's chip in. But I think so the common sense was, and it leads not to do reviews or bad reviews, we all festivals, we agreed that there's a lack of canon in shorts. And I think so that was the main motivation to chip in money into the project. Say, okay, we want the canon. And now, of course, it's the logic probably to have good reviews or the films you like. So it's a different situation than in feature films.
I also do remember that conversation in the kitchen.
There is, again, there is a practicality as well. Once again, you go to a feature film festival and say in their competition, there might be 12 features, 15 features, and that outlet will try and review every single one of them and give equal space to each one. Short film festivals can have 40, 50, 60. There is a physicality that is, unless you have a lot of money or a lot of people doing that or somebody who is prepared to never sleep ever, you have to pick and choose by that. And even if you are just saying, we're going to look at, say, the competition films, there is a physicality of, to write a short film is shorter than a feature film, but to write about a short film is not less time than it is to write about a feature film. The amount of work that goes into writing about a short film can be the same amount as it takes to a feature film, and therefore if you times that by how many more short films there are, how it gets covered is a little more spotty, for want of a better word, because you just cannot cover everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and John mentioned canon, and also it's a word that I don't usually use, though I have like an ambiguous feeling about it. But what we're doing at Kortfilm.be, having these like Belgian films as like the backbone of the catalog, in a sense it is like canonizing the Belgian short film cinema, even though we do not promote it like that. And I think there's definitely a value in it's part of that educational role that I think the platform has. It's not really adding much, I just wanted to say that. And I think in terms of what we do at Talking Shorts is if we cover a festival, for now we only publish 2 pieces, whether that be a review or an interview or an essay. And I think actually I think in the future we want to do more, but also in a way it is good to limit ourselves to just a few focuses and again to curate within a program what we think is important, and by that maybe in the end creating some kind of canon, I don't know. Yeah.
One more question from the audience. If not, I really wanted to ask you to slowly head toward the end of the session. What else has changed over the years, 18 years ago? Because we spoke very briefly about the form that Savina mentioned, podcasts. But I'm very curious if you also see some new exciting trends or maybe forms of not only what was back then, only printed media basically, and now maybe there is also a little bit of shift. Does it have any meaning, or maybe it's more community-oriented?
I mean, the fragmentation of culture in general, is there, and that leads to the fragmentation of criticism. It's no longer there is one film magazine, or in each country there is a famous film magazine, and therefore that's the place that you go to. It is the fact that Talking Short, Uberquarian, Yellow Bread can all exist in their own spaces and that people can find them. Now, it's an obvious point because it's like lots of bits of culture. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, because again, we always have this idea of the narrowing of culture, that people go to what they know rather than sometimes being pushed into a new place. So obviously that fragmentation, which is in some way good because there are these spaces that there weren't necessarily there before, just smaller ones, but is it too fragmented? I don't know.
I think one of the biggest things that changed is probably that everybody can be a critic, or at least everybody thinks they can be a critic. I mean, with platforms like Twitter and stuff. So there's more access for people to explore that, I would say. I'm not really, personally, I don't, I know there's a lot of like video essays being made. I'm not really, I don't know much about them, so maybe Savina has more to say about those. I think I suppose they're very interesting. Maybe I should just go to the Savina directly.
I don't know. I don't think you should definitely go back and then finish your thoughts.
No, I did.
Take the time to convince you that video essays are absolutely amazing. Like a salesperson that I am. No, I really, my definition of film criticism, I'm very strict when it comes to myself and my own writing, my own output. But I see film criticism as being many different things, and a form of engagement that can be productive across mediums, across social media, across platforms, across audiovisual styles too. Can think about short films quality embedded with so many video essays. So many video essays get submitted and get judged in short film festivals, and I think it's a very natural thing to have them together. It's just a way of investigating the world. So in a way, the video essay can bring it closer to what we do and what filmmakers do. I think it's quite intuitive, at least for me, the way I view it. And teaching it's with my students, I think they mostly see it as a stepping stone between theory and their own filmmaking practice, which, to be fair, I don't think it's a bad thing. I'm all about syncresis and just bringing things together and synthesis. I think this holds a lot more potential than sharp separations.
And also you mentioned print, and I think there it's the other way. It's just going down and down and down. So last week somebody asked me, like, what is the next step for Kortwendel.be? Are you thinking about print? And I'm like, yeah, I'm not even thinking about it anymore. It's just like, it seems very unrealistic to go into print, which is sad, but I think that's the situation.
So, any final remarks of the three of you to wrap it up? Short criticism, a new hope.
I'm not as pessimistic as Niels.
Okay, good.
I do believe there is new hope for criticism, because I do believe there are those spaces that didn't exist before. The very nature of what it is and where it goes is changing. And we have serious questions to ask about the structures and how people can actually do it and support themselves, and that is for discussions like wearing many different hats and other discussions about the sustainability of art and culture in general. But I do think there are other people out there who do have voices, great new talent out there, and I do think they have more of an opportunity to get out there than I did 22 years ago when I started. 22 years ago, oh God, when I started.
3 children ago.
More hair.
No, yeah, maybe I'm too pessimistic. I don't know. It's a matter of. I mean, we had a talk 2 days ago about fair pay. I think I'm very much in that mood right now, still. But on a positive note, I'm happy that there's still that the amount of streaming platforms keeps growing, even though people are definitely also overwhelmed. That again, there's the programmers and the critics hopefully guiding the audiences. And I had something that I wanted to say. I'm not sure if I can find it. Yeah, also, just like a thing that sometimes people tell me that that at Kortfilm.be in Belgium you have like a monopoly on writing about shorts, and I always tell them, no, we don't want this monopoly. Please make sure that other outlets write about shorts, and let's hope that if there's an outlet here, I don't know, that they take on that message. Yeah. That's it.
So you want competitors
yeah,
to
why
create
not?
this dialogue between critics? And,
I think then the criticism will only benefit from that.
And also, as a freelancer, more outlets are always good.
Definitely.
Savina, your final notes on New Hope?
I just wish I was there with you guys. Because,
Us too.
Okay, very, very sweet to conclude with. So, first of all, thank you very much, dear audience, for sticking with us till the very end. I also wanted to mention something I forgot in the very beginning, that this panel is organized in collaboration with Talking Shorts, actually. So whoever still is not aware, Talking Shorts is an online magazine dedicated to short film only. And also it will be available, the recording of the talk will be available at YouTube channel of Talking Shorts. And of course, I really want to thank you for talking with us in person or online about your work, your expertise, and bringing back the memories from the Oberhausen almost 20 years ago. So thank you. And that was it. The last panel has just concluded. So one more info from Enrico. There are still tickets available, 12 tickets available from the screening of Arte Shorts. So whoever wants to catch up, there's still an opportunity to do so. And thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much, everybody.